خلق من عدم ثم الصلاة على المختار في قدمي وبعد. I mean, sending durood on the Prophet alayhi salatu taslim can be done lying down, can be done sitting down, can be done standing, can be done leaning on a wall. Perhaps that might be a bit bad adab. But what I'm trying to say is that you can send durood on the Prophet from anywhere and anyhow. Just like you can do dhikr of Allah lying down, sitting down, crouching down, and so on. So in the issue of standing and sending blessings on the Prophet, it's not really a problem. Even if you all stood up now and sent it to the Prophet, this doesn't change the permissibility of doing it. So you can do it sitting down, standing down. With regards to stuff like the hair, the noble hair of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu taslim, well, we know that the ulama of the past used to seek blessings through the athar of the Prophet. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, we know this has a sahih chain to this incident, that he used to seek blessings through the hair of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu taslim. People used to take the wudu that used to fall from the hair of the Messenger of Allah, the Sahabah radiallahu anhum ajma'in. We believe in our religion a notion of tabarruk, of blessing. Yeah? So, but whether that was actual hair, I don't know, Allah knows best. Yeah? Allah knows best. But if it were to be the hair of the Messenger of Allah, or in some of the Sahaba, his saliva, yeah, because his saliva is not the same as your saliva. His hair is not the same as your hair. His skin is not the same as your skin. If I touch your skin, it doesn't make me bari' min al-jahannam. It doesn't make me free from Jahannam. You touch the skin of the Messenger of Allah, you're guaranteed heaven. So it's not the same. It's not the same. But whether the Prophet is present, whether he hears and so on, this is a separate issue, which I think is better to be discussed, rather than a public forum, in private, and to try and understand both sides of the argument. Why some ulama say he might be present in a particular majlis. What do they mean by hadra, the presence? Is it the presence of the Messenger of Allah in someone's heart at that moment, like recollecting Allah when you're doing dhikr? You're recollecting Allah. You're trying to bring Allah, into your recollection. It doesn't mean Allah is in your heart and sitting there, but you're recollecting Him. You're having a presence with Him, and whether that's allowed with regards to the Prophet, this is something that ulama have differed over. It's a very detailed issue, but I think it'd be best to discuss it maybe individually on that particular issue. But with regards to the others, it's perfectly permissible, and this is documented in all the books of fiqh. Seeking blessings through the Messenger of Allah. There's never been any ikhtilaf over this. And to stand and send durood onto the Prophet, this has never been ikhtilaf. You can do it standing, sitting, lying down, or whichever way. Allahu a'lam bisawab. Allahu a'lam bisawab.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa
Jazakallah khair for your talk. Before coming to this talk, I had a different view, and in all my honesty, even after listening to your talk, I still hold the same opinion that we should not celebrate the birthday of the Prophet. And you raised various objections, and you answered various objections that you said were raised by people. You defined Bidah as something which cannot be proved to have been done in the light of Quran and Hadith, and yet you did not quote even one Hadith or a verse of Quran to prove your point.
Yeah.
That's one of my reasons.
Sure.
And the first objection that you used was Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to fast on Mondays because he was born on Monday. And again, you did not quote any hadith for that. Second objection, you said that Prophet did not celebrate. Prophet celebrated birthday of Hazrat Khadija.
Not birthday.
You said that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to remember Khadija often, but that's not an objection, because obviously nobody would say that we should not remember Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam often. But it's about the birthday, especially on that birthday, because it's not just that we should stay away from Bidah, but
Yeah.
also a risk of Bidah, somewhere where there's a risk that people might be involved in Bidah, because we've seen in various hadiths like how Hazrat Umar cut down the tree where there was a risk that it could be
Led
used
to,
as a sign of worship. And the third objection was, I can't remember that one. Could you say what the third objection was?
Oh, one of the objections was that some people say Rabi' al-Awwal, the 12th Rabi' al-Awwal is not the date. So therefore, if there's disagreement over the date, you can't celebrate something where the date is differed over. And the fourth one, free mixing and so on in some places, therefore the Mawlid is not allowed. I think you're right. The reason why I didn't quote the hadith is because my talk wasn't about the textual evidences for it. This is an usuli argument, I think, for the permissibility of celebrating the Mawlid. One, the reason why I mentioned the objection that some people say that the Prophet never marked out his birth date. And that's incorrect, because he did mark out his birth date of Rabi' al-Awwal on Monday by fasting. So he acknowledged a thanks to Allah for his birth date. And what the usul mujtahidun say is that, okay, why did the Prophet, or what was the illah, what was the reason behind him fasting on that day? And the illah, they say, is because of his birth date. That's the reason why he fasted, to thank Allah. So that what grounds his action was his own birth date. So what the mujtahidun say is that they say, okay, if that is the case, so then it must be permissible for us to thank Allah for the Prophet's, for the reason being the Prophet's birth date, because the Prophet did it and he didn't prohibit anyone from doing it. So the mujtahidun say, okay, if the Prophet didn't say, I'm the only person allowed to fast on my birthday, all of you are not allowed to do it, he didn't say that. So one of the evidences, the fuqaha says that, okay, if he didn't prohibit it, then we can remember that date. We should be remembering the Prophet all year round. And anyone who considers celebrating the Mawlid as permissible will tell you, you cannot restrict it to the 12th of Rabi' al-Awwal. Open up any fiqh book you see. They said all year round, but are you allowed to do it on that day where people's hearts are more inclined towards it? So like, let's say, Mondays and Thursdays. So Laylatul Qadr, Laylatul Nisf Sha'ban, other nights that are excellent nights, rewardable nights, where we should pray. There are other nights as well, not as meritorious, but like Mondays and Thursdays, we should do it, the night of Jum'ah. Now, the reason why the Laylatul Qadr and these nights are celebrated is that people are already ready to celebrate on this night. Their heart's already inclined towards it. So doing a bit extra on that night can't be bid'ah. So same with the Rabi' al-Awwal. We should be remembering the Prophet all year round. Can't remember him for one day and forget him 363 days a year or 364 days a year. No, all year round. But can we on that day as well? That is the argument. Can we on that day as well? So this is one of the other proofs. The other proof people use is that this is a sahih narration, and it's mentioned in all the fiqh books, like for example Subul Salam, you can read in that. You can read it in the Fatawa Ibn Taymiyyah's book as well. You can read it in Mawahib al-Laduniyya of Imam Zarqani, that he mentions that Abu Lahab, when the Prophet was born, freed a slave, Thuwayba her name was. She freed a slave. Because Abu Lahab was so happy, the Prophet, his nephew was born on that day, he freed a slave on that day. And because of that action, Allah lightens his punishment. Because of that action. And this is sahih. So what the ulama have deduced from that is that if a kafir who's in Jahannam, Abu Lahab in Jahannam, Allah has lightened the punishment because of his love for the Messenger of Allah. On that day he was born, he freed a slave. By bab awla, by qiyas awla, by greater reasoning, a Muslim who is better than a kafir, if he remembers the Prophet for that day by feeding the poor, or just saying, Allah, we thank you for sending your messenger on this day, or giving sadaqah, or talking about his seerah, it must be even more permissible. So this is usuli argument. This is the reason why I don't want to go into it, because it goes into evidential issues. because you need to understand it from the evidences. Other evidences include the point that he mentioned, that he visited Khadija radiallahu anha. What some people say is that the Prophet died on Rabi al-Awwal. How can you celebrate his death date? Well, the issue is that, you know, the Prophet marked out someone's death date, his wife, the martyrs of Uhud, his uncle Hamza, regularly, ala kulli ra's al-hawl. And that's what the hadith mentions in al-Bayhaqi. That every so often he used to go. On that day as well, and every so often. Meaning he used to remember their death date and visit them on that day. So it must be permissible you to mark out the death date of someone and do ziyarah, visit them or remember them on that day. So, you know, these are just some of the evidences put together cumulatively to say, is it permitted, is it mubah to celebrate the Prophet? Not is it wajib, is it sunnah? I don't know if anyone has said it's obligatory. I've not heard any fuqaha say that. I've not heard any fuqaha say it's recommended. Some minority maybe have said it's recommended. But is it allowed? Meaning, is there a permission from Sharia to remember the Prophet on that day? That's all the claim is. Now how you do it is up to you, depending on whether there's evidence for it. So on that day, whether you want to talk about the seerah, the life of the Prophet, or whether you want to feed some poor people and say, out of shukr to Allah, I want to feed some poor people, out of love for the Messenger of Allah, I want to feed some poor people on this day, I want to give sadaqah, I want to do a talk, or you know, whatever it is, whatever action that is allowed in Islam, to do that is permitted. That's why Ibn Taymiyyah said, if you do it out of love for the Messenger of Allah and respect and veneration for him, if that is your intention and you take it as a Eid, Eid means something you do again yearly, something that you Eid, something that returns again and again, and you take it as a mawsim, a seasonal thing, then this is a great reward, ajrun azim, for doing it, of course. But if you do it out of copying the Christians, then Shaykhul Islam says, no, this is wrong. You got to go to your basis. Your basis is Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas. You don't say the Christians do it, therefore I do it. You say, is there an evidence from the Sharia? And this is some of them, just some of the istidlal, some of the extractions the fuqaha have made to say, is it permitted? If you don't do it, you don't do it. You know, that's why I don't really want to make it a sort of tussle issue. Just, is it permitted? Is there evidences, dalail from the text that allow someone to thank Allah for the Prophet on that day, to remember him on that day, as well as every other day of the year?
Just one more
yeah.
point. We all know that Sahabah Kiram, they were much more intelligent than we were.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Do you have any proof that any of the Sahabah Kiram, they celebrated the birthday?
This is why the principle I mentioned, it was all a principle that ترك الفعل لا تفيد تحذير. Just because the Prophet didn't do something, or the Sahaba didn't do something, the fuqaha say this doesn't mean it's haram. Because the Prophet didn't do many things. He didn't climb up a tree. He didn't swing on a swing. He didn't, he didn't do many things. But that doesn't make it haram. Because then many things in the Sharia we can't do now because the Prophet didn't do it. Can you see? So the fuqaha said this principle, ترك الفعل لا تفيد تحذير. Just because the Prophet left an action, he didn't do it, it doesn't mean it's haram automatically. What we do, what we have to do, for anything you're allowed to do, you see, is there an evidence from the Sharia? This is why Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali's definition of bid'ah, I quoted, not my definition, I think it summarizes it beautifully. That he says a bid'ah is something which has no لا أصل في الشريعة يدل عليه. That it has no basis in the Sharia with an evidence. If you've got an evidence, then you're allowed to do it from Sharia. Can you see? So but the main issue that I wanted to raise was not to go into these evidential issues, to the 2 points that I raised just in my final conclusion, that is just celebrating the Mawlid the extent of mahabba? No, cannot be. Whoever thinks that, I'm sorry, that is incorrect. Just because you celebrate the Prophet's birthday on one day a year, it means you've fulfilled your love for him. No. You have to work for his sunnah, safeguard it, protect it, implement it in your life. And the second issue that I wanted to raise was that the Sharia was a castle, a fortress, which the Prophet built to protect his ummah. And I want to ask, where is this fortress today? And our direction should be towards that. Allahu A'lam.
Your question? No?
Bis-sawab.
Question.
Assalamu alaikum. I just want to make a point about the point you actually made at the end, that it's sad. It's sad today that this ummah has come to the point where we're actually discussing and debating the issue of whether the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whether is celebrate his birth is actually halal or haram. When we actually forget the main obligation. It's like a person who misses his fard salah, and he knows that he's very sinful for missing his fard salah, but he goes out there and he discusses and he debates about the mandubat, and this is exactly what is happening today. The whole purpose of the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he has mentioned it. And that point was to spread the word La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the four corners of this earth. Absolutely. And the Muslims today, the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the same Ummah, have forgotten that. And I think this is the point. This is the point we will come back on. When we come back and discuss this issue, other than the issue of what?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, with the message of our Rasul alayhi salatu wa taslim was to take Islam to the four corners of the earth. And we've taken Islam to the four corners of our house. Not going beyond our houses. There are people who want to make our religion so insular, so connected to your house and leave it in there. Isn't it? They're trying to say Islam, leave it in your house, in your four corners of your house. Yeah. Whereas the message, the risala of our Prophet was what? So that it spreads to all of the entire world. And this is the mentality the Sahabah had to take the message of Islam. But the other point we've got to come back to, brothers. Yes, what is our awlawiyat? What is our priority? Because Islam has priorities as well. Islam prioritizes things for us as well. At the moment, the Muslim world is without this fortress, this Sharia. How can we be living by Islam without this Sharia, this fortress? We can't. We can't live our deen the way we want to without this fortress, this Sharia. And it can only be implemented, as I said, through the Khilafah system. And this is where our attention, I believe, should be directed towards. That we must work diligently to bring this fortress back, to rebuild this fortress again, that the Prophet did to protect his ummah in, like a lion protects the cubs in the jungle. Without it, we are defenseless. Without it, we are powerless. Without it, we are even defenseless and powerless to protect our own Prophet. So let us think, what are our priorities really? What are our priorities? Allahu A'lam bis-sawab.
Suhail.
Just want to add on to the question that the brother made at the front. The people who argue that you can celebrate Milad is because of their love for the Prophet ﷺ, and the people who say it's not, it's because they look at the Sharia or what evidence and say, look, this is Bidah. But either way, they have their Islamic values that argue that point. But then, if you are arguing from the Sharia point of view, then what is the Sharia's verdict for insulting the Prophet ﷺ? What is the Islamic verdict for drawing the Prophet ﷺ, for insulting him, or to insult him when they say that he's a paedophile? Yeah? What is the Islamic verdict? What has all the fuqahas and all the Islamic scholars said? On top of that, what is the Islamic verdict for that who insult the Quran? When they burn it, they do it out of insult. What about the Ummah as well? What did the Prophet ﷺ utter before he passed away? We got to look at this. When we can't even protect the Prophet ﷺ's honor, we can't even protect the Quran's honor, we can't even protect the Ummah's honor. That's what we need to be looking at. That's what we should be discussing. Our obligations, our fard, to bring back the Sharia. And like you said, that's the only thing that can protect us.
Look for.
So I was wondering if the brother could shed light on the issue of the Sunnah. We hear a lot of the times that, okay, we're all going astray because we're abandoning the Sunnah. We have to hold on to the Sunnah, we have to protect the Sunnah. Now, from general understanding, from what I can see, it doesn't make sense. It can't be that the Sunnah is everyone's got a long beard, wear a thobe, and wash between your toes properly.
Mm.
And if we abandon that, that's Islam's going to get destroyed. Because not everyone's wearing a long coat. Now, is it possible to shed light? What is the definition? When we say, or in the hadith when it's mentioned, that the people abandoned the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. What is meant by the definition of Sunnah? Is it just these recommended acts or?
Bismillah. Yeah, of course. You know the Sunnah. Sometimes our thinking about the Sunnah gets affected and we don't really realise. It is true. Many people have, whether they are conscious of it or not, have restricted the Sunnah to very individualistic aspects. So brother, you know, you must observe your individual aspects of your Sunnah. And because you're not doing those, it is for that reason, because your neglect of doing your individual Sunnah, we got all the economic, political, social problems of the Muslim world. I don't know how these two can be connected. I don't know how, because the brothers of Palestine, Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on, are in their political problem of occupation. Wallahi, I don't know how, because perhaps their beards aren't long enough. I really don't know how to make that connection, and I don't think there is one. Qadi Ibn Arabi, he says, Ibn Arabi, he says, وَصَلَاحُ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ إِقْبَالُهَا عَلَيْهِ صلى الله عليه وسلم وَفَسَادُهَا إِعْرَاضُ عَنْهُ. The salah of this ummah, all the goodness of this ummah, all the greatness of this ummah, all the piety of this ummah, all the excellent things of this ummah, all the righteousness of this ummah will only come about if the ummah turns to the sunnah in its entirety. وَفَسَادُهَا إِعْرَاضُهَا عَنْهُ. And the corruption of this ummah, all the evils of this ummah, all the bad things of this ummah, is because of her turning away from the whole of the sunnah. The sunnah is everything that the Prophet ﷺ brought, did, approved, whether tacitly or explicitly, said, did, everything. Not just the way he walked, or the way he carried himself, ﷺ, or how long his beard or his hair was, or how he used to conduct his acts of individual worship. No. It means every aspect that the Prophet did. And that means in how he ruled, in how he administered justice, in how he configured the society, in how he arranged the society, in how he prepared the army. In everything, the sunnah cannot be restricted to just individual aspects. No. The sunnah is everything that the Messenger of Allah taught us on. All levels of society, all aspects of our actions, all areas of our life. So we got to break out of this mentality, where we may not realize we're doing it, is that we reduce the sunnah to individual aspects and say, if anyone doesn't do that, that's where Allah has given us all these calamities, this musibah. I can't see how Palestine being occupied, how protesters in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, places in Morocco, Sudan, the Sudan problem, the Chechnya, the Balkan problem, the Afghanistan, Central Asian problem, all this is from perhaps someone not having a fistful of beard maybe, or rolling up their trousers. Not to demean these things, but I don't see how the two are connected. I don't see how the economic crisis is linked to someone who forgot to roll up his trousers. I really don't. And the solution isn't the more we roll up our trousers, the oil crisis is going to be fixed. No. Islam has a specific solution for that problem of occupation. Islam has a specific solution for that problem of exploitation of resources. Islam has a specific solution for the problems, the social problems that we have in society. So Islam has a specific ruling to solve these issues. We can't bring individual aspects of ibadah to say that by doing these we're going to solve the whole problem of the ummah. Allah knows best, but the sunnah is comprehensive, and we have to understand it that way. I don't know if that answers the question.
Assalamu alaikum. Imam Ghazali said that if there is no, if the Khilafah has been destroyed and there's no one to give bay'ah to, that means that if we die, then we basically die as disbelievers. can we find right or wrong?
Not disbelievers, but yeah. But
So
you
we
state
need
of
to
Jahiliyyah.
give bay'ah to an imam. So in this day and age, because there's no khulafa, there's no leader, then how do we do we just give our bay'ah to I don't know, local imam or
Jazakallahu khairan. This is itself a long topic, but yes, there is a hadith sahih that mentions that anyone man mata laysa fi unuqihi bay'ah mata mitatan jahiliyyah. That anyone who dies without there being a bay'ah on his neck, meaning without there being a khalifa or an imam in place to whom the pledge is given, a bay'ah is given, this person dies in a state of jahiliyyah, as if he were to die in a state of non-Islam or pre-Islam. And the seriousness of it really should be brought to our attention. That at the moment, we do not have an imam to whom the bay'ah is given, to whom our pledge of authority is given. He's not present. And that hadith, in fact, is an indication that the imam has to be present. Because Allah said, the Prophet said, whoever dies without a bay'ah being on his neck, and you cannot give a bay'ah unless there is a khalifa. So therefore it becomes obligatory that a khalifa has to exist for you to give a bay'ah to him. Otherwise we will be dying in a state of jahiliyyah. Yes, this is true. But bay'ah is not given to the local imam necessarily, unless of course he gets voted by the Ummah through the right procedure and becomes khalifa. But the work should be made to re-establish all the conditions necessary for us to have a khalifa. And really this is something, again brothers, I will urge you to think about. What can you do and how you can join for this work? Because while the time that we are in without a bay'ah over our necks, it doesn't mean we all have to give the bay'ah. We have to have the bay'ah over our necks, meaning there has to be an imam to whom a bay'ah is given on our behalf. So long as this state is non-existent, we will be sinful. We will be sinful, everyone. Because it said man mata, and man here of course is harfu ta'meem as well, it's a general indication as well. It means anyone, man or woman. So we've got to really seriously think about it. That I need to discharge this obligation. Otherwise I'll be sinful. And I urge you all really to think about it and to join in the work for it. And inshallah really to be earnest and sincere in it. To think about it, study it. There are brothers here who could perhaps help you. There are other talks I know going on discussing these issues, and I urge you all and sincerely invite you all to learn about this and to join the call. Inshallah.
Okay brothers, we're going to end it here today.